Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Bizweek Building Cyber Resilience in Your Business event for 2021. Welcome to everyone who is attending online, joining us virtually. Thank you very much for joining us. My name is Paula Oliver, and I am the manager of the South Australian Cybersecurity Innovation Node, part of the AUST Cyber Network. As the host of today's event, I'd like to formally welcome you all as part of the Bizweek Showcase for 2021. And I'd like to thank everyone involved in coordinating today's event. In addition, and in particular, our host for today, the A3c, for generously providing the venue, a very relevant venue for the topic that we'll be discussing today. I'd also like to acknowledge that the land we meet on today is the traditional lands of the Kaurna people, and we respect their spiritual relationship to country. I acknowledge that the Kaurna people are the traditional custodians of the Adelaide region and that their cultural and heritage beliefs are still as important to the living Kaurna people today. Before we begin, I will cover some very quick housekeeping, if I may. In the event of an emergency and in the event of the sirens going off, please remain calm and follow the nearest emergency exit sign, which are to our left, down the corridor to the very end and left also. Bathrooms are off the corridor to the left, and mobile phones we would ask you to please put on silent or turn off. We are permitting photography today, and we would encourage you to share on socials with the hashtag of Bizweek 2021. So the focus of today's event is how South Australia can build a cyber resilient state through greater resilience in our small business community. And today we're going to hear from a number of industry leaders on cyber and cybersecurity experts who are going to be sharing their knowledge, experience on how we can build cyber secure small businesses. For everyone who has registered both online and in person today, we will be providing some virtual take-home packs for everyone, which will include useful links and materials for you to explore for your business in your own time. So moving on to this afternoon's event. The cyber threat has been with us now for some time. It's not new. It has an unprecedented level of growth, and in recent times, one of the most vulnerable groups are small businesses and the SME community. This is particularly true in situations where those small businesses are within a supply chain to large corporates or contractors. They are often considered the weak underbelly by those cyber threat actors. And it's no secret that small businesses have very limited resources at their disposal to address that cyber threat, whether that's in terms of dollars or actual people. And so the key question asked by small businesses is how best can I spend my very limited resources on protecting my organisation from an attack? And what is the very minimum I actually need to do? Our goal from today is to try and answer these questions for you and provide you with some options to explore. So the format of today's event will be a welcome address from the Director of High Tech and Cybersecurity from the Department of Innovation and Skills in SA Government. We will also have a keynote from the CEO of A3c, Mike Barber, who'll provide us with some insights into the centre and what it has to offer our small business community here. We'll also be hearing from Maximum Energy, who'll be walking us through a very short case study, as well as a great lineup of cyber experts for an insightful panel discussion. I would like to remind everyone that today's session is being live streamed and that the session will be available for viewing after the event via the virtual hub. So to kick off our first speaker, we're joined by David Goodman, Director of High Tech and Cyber from the Department of Innovation and Skills. David's here to give us an overview of what the state government's doing to ensure that small businesses are supported and secure, as well as some insights from the Cyber Industry Action Plan that's due for release in coming months. So everyone will be getting a bit of a sneak preview into some of what that content is. David, in his previous role, was the Chief Information Security Officer for SA Government and has a wealth of experience and knowledge to be able to help shape the security of our state's industry. David, over to you.
Thank you, Paula. Welcome, everybody, to attending this event online and those in person today. So my team works closely with industry and across industry sectors to ensure cyber is front of mind for everyone and that there are avenues for support for small business in South Australia. One of our priorities is the high-tech sector plan, which was released late last year, and it's part of South Australian's government's growth state agenda. And it's one of 9 strategies across a range of priority sectors, including health, agriculture, mining and energy, creative industries, space, defence, tourism and international education. The plan was developed after extensive industry consultation, research to identify opportunities and priority actions to grow our state's high-tech sector. High-tech and its technologies are an enabler of productivity, competitiveness and growth across all sectors. One key activity for us, which Paul has mentioned, is the Cyber Industry Action Plan. We see cyber crossing all sectors, and it's important that we cover and support small business in these areas. The key themes around these are R&D and innovation, investment, resilience, capability and skills. Mention resilience. So this is what we're doing here today, is really supporting SMEs to build cyber resilience and improve their cyber maturity. The aim of the action plan, which will be released later this year, we hope to have it within the next few months, is to deliver economic benefits to the state, create industry growth, strengthen skills and career pathways, employment and jobs. Within the plan, there will be a number of activities for SMEs to partake in, and we'll be looking at having more events later this year in how we can improve your cyber maturity. So thank you everyone for attending, and I'll hand over to the next speaker.
Thank you very much, David. So we've already mentioned that the cyber threats are very real and that they are increasing in frequency and severity, and small businesses don't necessarily have the adequate resources to protect themselves. It can be confusing to know what the practical, cost-effective solutions can be that need to be employed to increase cyber resilience for that business. And so now we're joined next by Mike Barber, CEO of A3c, who's going to walk us through a little bit about what A3c does and how it is here to assist and support our small business community. Welcome, Mike.
Thanks very much, Paula, and welcome to everyone to the A3c, and we're really happy to support Bizweek. You may know that A3c is part of Lot 14, so it's a very exciting precinct here in Adelaide. It's a precinct full of startups. We have the Space Centre here, various IT companies and businesses around here. So it's a real unique ecosystem within itself, within Adelaide. So just a bit of background about myself. I commenced here all of 3 weeks ago, so I am completely on top of this situation and what we're doing, and the guys before me have done a fantastic job in getting this set up. So we have a brand new facility here, and lots of services that we offer, and connecting everyone is our main game. So I have a long career in business, government and IT. I'm only 32. It's been a really tough road. But we're really excited. I'm really excited to be involved with A3c, because I really want to try and help the ecosystem, not just in South Australia but nationally as well. So this is a really good challenge. About the A3c, so we're a not-for-profit organisation. We have obviously a national focus, but we're also linking into global organisations as well. We've had a kickstart from the SA government to actually get the facility built, but we need to be self-sustainable in 2 years' time. So our main aim here is to grow the community here so we can keep going. We're a member-based organisation, so it's very important that we provide value to the members of this organisation, and in turn they provide services back to the whole community. Our main aim is to be an independent body for the Australian cyber ecosystem at the end of the day. So essentially we're a broker or the conduit connecting a whole lot of different stakeholders in this environment. We've got strong partnerships already with defence, government and other service providers, particularly universities and further education, which has spin-offs into research and training as well. So it's not just about the big organisations either, which is very relevant to Bizweek. So this is all about helping the SME sector as well, because invariably in that area, that's where you have the issues of where do I go, who do I trust, who do I talk to, who can help me with my business going forward. And particularly with the SME sector, even the members that we have that are SMEs themselves are very nimble and agile, and they can develop things much quicker than larger organisations and actually get them to market. So that's what we're looking for. Just a quick overview of our key services. So we actually have a physical cyber range here, and a cyber range is essentially that. It's an area, it's a safe environment where you can actually test your products and services in a simulated fashion. So you can actually go in there, we can have basically like war games, if you like, within the centre between a red team, blue team, whatever. So that is scaled to work at the highest level for defence, but we can also scale it to work for any type of business. So it's a really good facility. It's one of, I think it's the only one in Australia of this type that's available commercially. Defence, I think, have their own in that regard. So this is something that we really want to promote, and it's a real benefit to our members. On the training front, we also facilitate courses as well. Not that A3c directly delivers those courses, that's part of our member base that will actually do that, and that's how we help create that connectivity between them as well and businesses. We also support companies launch their new products and services. So the cyber range is one way to do that. Another way is to connect them to the right people. But overall, we're also trying to build cyber awareness and resilience, which is the topic for today, is, how do you make your company more resilient to the threats that you face every day? Another point is also trying to increase the cyber workforce as well. So that's a really important measure here. I think government statistics show that in this industry it's about 17,000 people short today. It's a very big growing industry. So we need to make sure we've got people educated in the right way and have that experience and can find pathways to employment. In particular to the SME environment, we provide a link to expert resources, through our different connections we have with, say, the Australian Cyber Security Centre, AusCyber, our members. And the key things that we're looking for there is more awareness. They can provide testing, audits, planning, running operations, all those sorts of things. But our members can actually help you in your business to actually protect you. So in summary, our overall aim here is collaboration. So that's in the name of A3c. And the main thing there is we create that ecosystem that connects everyone and that we can actually solve the real world challenges. So it's very hard to do that in 5 minutes to give you a complete overview, but hopefully you get a gist of what we're about. And we have a website which is a3c.co. You can go there and connect through and find out how we can connect you with other businesses. So thanks very much, Paul.
Thank you, Mike. That's excellent. And I'll just reiterate, please visit the A3c website. There's a wealth of information there and details about all of their members, a very diverse member base. So please have a look. So next, we're going to be joined by Noon McNamara, who's generously provided her time this afternoon from Maximum Energy to take us through a brief case study, really to sort of look at what the small business perspective is and the what's in it for me in terms of building cyber into your workforce. So I'll hand over next to Noon.
Thank you. Hi, Maximum Energy is a end-to-end energy management consulting firm. We do asset audit from the start and prepare companies to have a strategy for going towards net zero carbon or reducing your energy costs, really. And we're head office in South Australia. And I think that's a case study. I'm not sure whether everyone has read it. It's in Business Essay in March edition under case study where we went, Maximum Energy actually went virtual. It started as just to save our staff, so they're not traveling during the height of COVID, but it turned out to be one of the best strategy we ever done because our teams never late to a meeting since then. And a customer took a while to get used to it, but in the end, they all came into it as well, so that was good. We actually, as a renewable company, we try to be paperless, and one of the things we did was everything we do operationally is online. We have systems we have a good CRM to project management system to accounting system, they all link together. And we also, not an expert in IT, none of us, because most of us are engineers. So we actually engage Intro, which is a South Australian company, who help us prepare a cyber security plan that is affordable and flexible for what we needed. And I catch up with these guys every 3 months. But the best thing is everything we do is online and everything is serverless. So our email is on Office 356 and platform. And what else? We have two-factor authentication. We on Office 386 data. I think it's called tenancy data server. Yeah, that's mean everything is backup every night. And if Microsoft Office collapse, we be fine. That's what they guarantee me anyway. So far has been good. And going into virtual office, my main fear at the time was our culture of our team, and because our team loved to banter over special projects, for instance, I thought, oh my God, we're going to lose this. But in actual fact, it's not. MS team has given us every morning the closest relationship to all our staff interstate and here in South Australia. So I thoroughly recommend that if you could do it. And I do staff engagement every 3 months, and nobody has said, I want to go back to the office. So it has been 100% uptake. People said it's just nice to be able to also spend time with the family, because a couple of our staff have children, and they actually say, I can watch my kid learn to walk. So that was fantastic, especially in Sydney. You don't have to go too far. And intro also helped me understand some of the issues we have, our assets. When we help desk is online, so our team do not have to do anything. They just push a button, say, help desk, I have problem. And that's coming through iView, and that get fixed almost immediately wherever you are. So all our data is in SharePoint and OneDrive, which means you can access it from anywhere you are. And some of our team do work from the car sometimes when they go to project, and that has worked very well with the tablet. And I think that's all I'm not sure what else do you guys want to know?
No, that's fine. Thank you very much, Lou.
Thank
you. Okay, so as we move now onto our panel session, I would like to ask anybody who's viewing online to please remember to submit your questions via the app, which is downloadable, so Cvent Events. We will hold those questions till the end of the panel discussion and then table them with our panellists here this afternoon. I would now like to introduce our panellists. And joining us for the panel discussion, we have representatives from key organisations, including cyber professionals from CyberCX, CyberOps and A3c, and representation also from Business SA in South Australia. If I could ask our panellists to please come up and join me now on these lovely comfortable stools at the front. Our first panellist I will introduce you to is Stephen Schmidt. Stephen, if you could just pop your hand up as you take your seat for everyone at home to be able to see who you are. And Stephen is the Advisor for the Entrepreneurs Program from Business SA. Our next panellist, sitting right next to him in perfect order, is David Simpson, who's the Executive Director of Governance, Risk and Compliance from CyberCX, one, if not the largest cybersecurity company in Australia. And he didn't pay me to say that, so that's good. Our next panellist is Dr. Danielle Floreani from CyberOps, one of our local success stories of a cybersecurity company out of South Australia. And our last but not least, needing no introduction, Mike Barber, who we've already met, CEO of A3c. So welcome, everyone. Thank you for giving up your time this evening to be able to join us. So before I come to each of you with the questions, I'm just going to propose some questions for our audience to consider as we do this panel discussion. So just keep this in mind. Do you have an online presence for your business? Is any aspect of your business digital? Is it banking? Is it your social media or your payment processing? Is it your communication with your customers or your website? Are you prepared if one or more of these services were to fail or be compromised? How long can your business survive without access to these services? And do you have a plan B? So just keep those questions front of mind as we go through our panel discussion, and keep open mind to any questions you might want to throw at our panellists when we finish. So David, I'm going to come straight to you, if I may. So could you talk us through what some of the prominent cybersecurity threats are that we're seeing in Australia at the moment, and perhaps maybe focus in on what the very typical or trending ones are towards small businesses right now? And I'll just add one more layer to that extremely long question.
Yep.
Has any of that changed since COVID as well?
Let's start from the beginning of the question. Yeah, the threat actors that we're seeing now, the people that are causing us problems both in small business and in the broader commercial and government space, come from two key sources. I suppose we get the criminal actors who are looking to monetize and gain monetary advantage from being able to get access to our information, or to cause impact to our ability to do business. So that's the ransomware, the threats to say, pay me this money or you don't get your data back. And then there is the nation-state threats that we're seeing more and more of, which you would have seen in the press, which relate to nation-states seeking to compromise our national infrastructure. And as Paula mentioned earlier, really they're targeting the smaller organisations in terms of the supply chain. Can we disrupt the supply chain so there is some consequence to the major operations, whether it's critical infrastructure or whether it's defence or whether it's government and education? The changes that we're seeing in terms of the reaction to COVID are really around our resilience. Are we really prepared to operate? Noon talked about being able to operate completely virtually, so we no longer have an office environment and physical infrastructure, and it's all in the cloud. Are we really prepared to deal with some of the concerns that were triggered by those moves when we went to COVID, in a COVID environment, when we responded to that? We, as an organisation, went completely virtual in a number of our locations in our UK office, and Melbourne was locked down for a significant period of time. We could not interact personally, so we had to look at online. How do we protect our customers' information in that space? How do we protect the information that's important to us that we needed to do our business? Have we got access to it when we need it? You know, Noon was talking about tablets and being able to be on site and mobile. In a true mobile environment, we had the challenge. How do we understand what's important to us as a business, and how do we protect it to make sure we access it when we need it, and make sure nobody that shouldn't access it gets access?
Great, thank you, David. Daniel, I'm going to hop to you next because you sat right next to David.
Yep.
And I'm going to just ask you to sort of talk about, you work with small businesses quite a lot through your company. Can you talk a little bit about what some of the common mistakes are that you would come across that businesses make in terms of cybersecurity or like their ops?
Yeah, sure. So I'll kind of answer in like a governance aspect and also a technical one, because they kind of cover both areas. So one of the main things that we see a lot is that people don't know the value of the information they have inside their company or the assets or the products. And that's a standard business problem. They should be solving that as part of their business, knowing what they're generating. And that leads to the value, then leads to the desire to look after it and to protect it. So they don't really know, how important it is that they do take cyber actions inside their business. But even that could be disaster recovery, business continuity as well. And part of that is doing some level of a risk assessment, trying to work out what all the things that could go wrong. And even when companies do risk assessments, they don't often put cyber in. They may put earthquake or something like that. So it's good that people start to think outside the box. And sometimes they may need help to do that, because people on this here basically know about a lot of the risks. It's people on the SMEs don't know about those, SMBs or SMEs don't know about the problems. So getting some advice from people about what the cyber risks could be. And from a technical side, I've been in IT for a long time, and I used to work in sales and whatnot. And you'd go into a customer or a company, and they would never have a diagram of their network. They have nothing documented. So it's a fascinating thing that people are so busy running their business that they don't document the network, they don't list the assets. And why is that important? So when we come in to try and fix things, let's say everything's broken, we go, right, tell us what you've got. And they go, we don't know. So then we have to try and find it out. But in the panic, or if the network's not working, how do we find out all the assets? So it's really important that people not only do risk assessments, but also capture and log their assets and the intellectual property as well before things go bad.
Excellent. Thanks, Daniel. Stephen, I'm going to jump over to you there. So from the perspective of Business SA as an organisation, you come across obviously a large number of small businesses and businesses. Could you comment on sort of the level of cyber maturity that you observe in those businesses in terms of, you know, the level of awareness around cybersecurity generally and how or if there's any implementation of cyber controls?
Sure. I suppose in a lead up to this event, I surveyed a number of facilitators in our program. The Entrepreneurs Program's got hundreds of growth facilitators around the country, and we're the premier small to medium-sized advisory support program of the federal government. Business SA has the contract in South Australia to provide those facilitators. So we work with over 250 small businesses in South Australia, generally around about the 3 mil to 6 mil bracket, some up to 100 million. But I'm just not going to talk about those for the time being, because let's just assume they've got their cyber discussion well and truly underway. Whether it's a good one, we'll leave that aside. But so let's just focus in on the salt of the earth kind of business, the small, large number of them. Generally, awareness, I'm going to separate awareness to resilience. So awareness since 2017 is definitely on the increase. I'd have a discussion with an owner before that time and they would say, what? And just nothing. So after that, you know, it might be because of some high profile incidents that have happened, especially in this state with a couple, and also what's on the news. So they're aware of the threat. The resilience part's where the problem is still there, is that head in the sand, it's not going to happen to me. That is changing because we're working with businesses now that have been exposed to a number of major cyber incidents. Now, one only last week, went in there to talk about why they're moving their entire technology stack to the cloud. The whole technology stack's moving to the cloud. It's because they've had 2 major cyber incidents, one of which is one of their customers. It was a business email problem. Malicious code got into one of the accounts staff's system, and an email didn't come from her, but the client got it. They paid the bill. So that's a significant problem, not only to brand and having to pay that bill. The second approach was when there was an internal email and they stopped it as his finger was on the send button to pay the bill. He thought, I'll just double check. So out of necessity, people move when there's an incident. So it's probably not where we want to see things. So the federal government, through the Department of Industry and the Entrepreneurs Program, have released a cyber awareness toolkit, which allows, it's free, it's on the business.gov.au, it allows businesses to go in there and do a bit of an assessment of their threat profile and the types of measures they should have in place. If they want to go any further, that's when you get onto CyberOps and the CyberCXs of the world, or talk to us as facilitators. There's one thing that's happening since COVID, we've found, is that there's a significant increase in the uptake of digital platforms. And traditional business owners are moving away from their hosted email system and their non-encrypted things that are sitting on servers that they don't even know about, and they're all moving to the cloud. That in itself has got risk. But however, what that allows them to do, 2-factor authentication is across all of those platforms, and therefore they have a much more secure footprint. So these are the sort of things we're seeing. With the increasing collaboration within supply chain, that again is another risk we've got to get on top of quickly, because that's where there's a number of cyber threats in the supply chain interaction, and systemising that. But generally we're seeing an increase in awareness. We're seeing an increase in resilience, but we need to provide more support to the small end of town to be able to get to to support them in getting their act together.
Absolutely. Thanks, Stephen. So, Daniel, I'm going to come back to you now very quickly. We've heard from Noon a great example about the amount of business aspects and tools that are used that are outsourced essentially or procured as a service. What are the key questions a small business should be looking to ask an outsourced ICT or IT provider?
Okay, so taking a step before that, companies really need to know their regulatory environment that they operate in, and especially if they're working in a critical infrastructure area, supplying to someone. Like even if you're supplying to SA Water, water's a critical infrastructure. The SA Water, for example, will be flowing down their requirements to their supplier, which could be an SME company. So they need to understand what may be coming down the track. And then you need to then work out what of those requirements do you need to then flow to your suppliers, because it's one big long supply chain, a supplier of suppliers. So an understanding of what's going on in the regulatory world. And the other thing also falls back to my earlier comment around knowing what your crown jewels are. So a really classic problem is that I outsource access to my crown jewels to a service provider. And they may, for example, have admin access to parts of my business. How are they protecting that admin access? So I could be doing everything according to the ASD Essential 8. I could be protecting all of my assets correctly, but I've got a service provider who has access to my assets, and that individual may move, so how do you keep track of the movement of staff in a supply chain? But also, they may write it down in their corporate systems. So service providers are a great spot for the baddies to get hold of, because not only do they get access to me and that customer, they get access to all the customers that service provider accesses, as well as the service provider themselves. So it's a great spot to go, and that's why SMEs or businesses need to be really, not strict is not the right word, but really understand what they need to flow through on their contracts with their service providers.
Excellent, thanks Daniel. Mike, I'm going to come to you now. So what are the sort of things that a small business should be prioritising as an absolute minimum in terms of cybersecurity, in your opinion?
Yeah, well, it's a pretty broad range of questions, and most of the guys on the panel here have already touched probably on most of those key things. So I'd go back to what Daniel was talking about, knowing what's the most valuable asset in your organisation to your business and how you're going to protect it, and what happens if you lost that, what are you going to do? So it is all about disaster recovery, business continuity, those sorts of things. I would suggest, and having done some consulting in small business for the last 2 years, apart from my involvement in larger organisations, the issues are exactly the same. Except I think there's a level of probably, whether it's ignorance or just misunderstanding about trusting people too much as well. As Daniel was talking about, your IT providers, you need to check on them to make sure that they're accredited as well. So it gets back to that supply chain. But I think I'd probably look at, if you're not really sure, you reach out to people, like people are sitting on this panel now, and other companies to come in and do an assessment of your environment would be the first thing I would do, to see where do you actually sit. And you need to go to an accredited provider as well that can actually do that, so you can actually trust them. But another thing that hasn't been mentioned though too, and I've seen this in small business where people have been hit, they've been ransomwared, they've been frozen out, and they just don't know what to do. And this was, say, going back 2 years ago, and they just go and ring some huge company, come in, pay $200,000 to them, hopefully get it all fixed, and on we go. They did learn that things like cyber insurance, so that's pretty important as well to try and protect you there. But those rules are actually tightening up at the moment too, because they're getting more aware of the breaches there. And it's the more resilient you are in your organisation, the better your premium could be too, and how you're going to be covered that way. But there's also frameworks out there as well that people can follow. So there's all sorts of NIST frameworks, Essential 8 guidelines there. There's Resilia. There's all these different things that are out there. They're the sort of things that you want to ask those providers, can you follow that framework, or can you do a self-assessment on your own sort of business? The other thing that was mentioned was around two-factor authentication with people working from home, more and more. Personal data getting mixed in with company data, USB keys, all these sorts of things. They're the sort of things you've got to look out for, because I know in any organisation, the moment you start bringing any sort of foreign data onto that network, i.e. people reading their Gmail at work, on your work network, you're opening yourself up for trouble there where somebody can just get into that network. Phishing was mentioned before. I've actually been a victim of that in a previous company. It's very real. I had an accountant who went and paid $40,000 to someone after I'd hassled him for 2 days. It's very real. They know how to mimic your language and all sorts of different things in there. So It's absolutely real. So you need to be very, very careful, as I think Steve said, or Dave might said, about pushing the button. Just think about it before you actually do that. And we saw that case, I think, the other week of someone, hitting the button on an email. Here's the BSB address, and hit the button and didn't verify who it was. And that's another common thing that's going on out there is around like the invoicing side of things, where these hackers can actually intercept your invoices, change the payment details on there. On it goes, they pay it, but it never actually goes to the person actually invoiced. So there's all these different things that are out there. Probably an assessment would be the first start for me.
Excellent. Thank you, Mike. So I'm going to come back to you, David, for another question before I open up to all the panel for another question before we take ones from those online and in the audience today. Stephen, you mentioned a few resources that are available online, federally provided. But David, are you aware of any other sort of free resources that are available for small businesses to utilise to really take a bit of a snapshot or assess where they're up to in terms of cyber security?
Yeah, and as Steve mentioned, and as you've mentioned, some of the federal sites, the Australian Cyber Security Centre, ascsc.gov.au, they have a free cyber assessment tool, which is quite good and quite easy to use in terms of that. And it produces a PDF report of recommendations that you can then action. So it's a really good first step to go, you know what, I don't really know. You don't know what you don't know. I will run this assessment tool, answer the questions. It will spit out a report that will give me some guidance. So that's the biggest one. There's a number of other tools which are a little bit harder to use that are available online, and you can easily search for cybersecurity assessment or cybersecurity tool and find some of these things. But usually they require some guidance, some technical knowledge to drive, whereas what the federal government have done and have tried to dumb it down, if you like, to make it easy for us non-technical people to try to drive in terms of where to go next is really the key. This is, give me a report, give me a nice little PDF that I go, well, these are the things that are a concern to me. Now I'm going to Google where I need to go next, or reach out to A3c to go, who can help me fix some of these challenges that I've got that have been identified based on what I've gone through as far as my assessment.
Excellent, thanks very much. And we are going to provide a take-home pack, both virtually and for those attending in person. You have some materials on your chair there which do have links to some of the useful resources which we've identified for you. Opening up to all the panel now, we've probably covered quite a lot already, but maybe just could I ask if anyone has any extra hot tips or words of wisdom that they would like to share with the audience and those online that hasn't already been covered in terms of if someone was starting from the very beginning in terms of addressing cyber, where would you actually start?
So I had one point, I think we've all touched on it, and that is a first step. To me, a first step is what we call the 4 Eyes principle, is that within your company, don't allow one email to trigger a payment unless you've verified it. And how do you verify it? Well, generally it's as simple as if you have a policy which says if your accounts person sending something to the director for payment and it's in the email, then make sure that it's followed up also by text message. It's very, very simple. And that will stop a lot of the major breaches. The other thing is, get all of your supply base to turn on the banking notifications if an account number changes. So that man-in-the-middle attack, which was mentioned, that wouldn't happen if it triggered a notice to say, hey, all of a sudden, Fred Incorporated's bank details has changed. So simple things like that should just be turned on straight away.
Yeah, bit of a trust but verify kind of methodology there. Yeah.
So I think in all things in cyber, we all say it's a journey. And every journey starts with a step. So when people look at these frameworks that are online and they may go, they're a bit confusing, just try a simple one, go through a simple framework like the ones that are on the ACSC website and go, well, that wasn't that scary after all. Maybe I can try a bit harder a framework next time or do something else. So we really want to encourage people to do something. and then just keep doing something and not do something once and then say, I've done my bit for the year. So,
great advice, thank you.
Also, just a question of the realisation that this is not about perfect, that as Daniel said, this is a journey and you've got to take that first step. And it might be, as Daniel pointed out in the earlier response, that you have to understand what's important to you as a business and where it is, right? Is this in the cloud? Is it somewhere on-prem, on our premises? And where should it be? It would be the next question after that. Is it better to be in the cloud? Yeah. Because they can look after it better than us in terms of resilience. They'll take backups, they'll look after the data, and still doesn't stop man-in-the-middle attacks and people paying the wrong thing, but at least you know what's important to you and where it lives.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great. Well, I think we might open up to questions. So first of all, if you haven't yet submitted your question, don't forget the app is available on the App Store to submit your question online, so Cvent Events app. And the first question that we've got here, and this is for all the panel to throw your response at, but which is the appropriate government body to report to when you get a suspicious email or links that are fake? Who do you go to?
Who wants to go first?
Well, I can name the first one. ScamWatch is obviously one that they should be looking at. And if it's a notifiable breach, then be aware of what your obligations are with not only your data, but with, more importantly, or just as importantly, your customers' data.
And that's a really interesting one. So that's legislation that maybe not everybody is all that familiar with. If you're not a really large corporate, certain parts of that just don't apply. But just as a regular sort of awareness of that kind of legislation, you have that responsibility to report if you've been breached, because you've got that responsibility of custodianship of other people's data. And similarly, your providers or your service providers have the same responsibility to report breaches that they've experienced that might actually involve your data. So it's a good one to mention, Stephen. Thank you.
So I delete most emails that look suspicious, but if they come from like a ISP, like my Internode service provider, or if they come from a customer that I've done business with, and we got one the other day saying we need to update your customer details, I go, oh, that's suspicious. We email them, we contact them, and they go, no, it's legit.
Yeah.
So it's just a matter of, that's a two-factor authentication. This is follow up, and if there's no follow-up, delete. And this is more about reporting. You can report it to bodies, innocent service providers that can start blocking those things, but that's for a lot higher frequency of data, so of emails. Yeah.
Certainly worthwhile remembering that if it is sensitive information, personal information, that there is an obligation under the Privacy Act for organisations above $2 million revenue.
Yeah, I think it's yeah.
And if you've got a data breach, a notifiable data breach now applies, so you've got to notify the Australian Office of the Information Commissioner on that breach and then take action to notify those people that you've managed to compromise their data somehow.
And again, that can be a really complex process, so lean in on your community that is here to support you in those aspects. The cybersecurity advisory community and your Business SA community would certainly be able to assist you with those types of things, because they're quite hard to navigate.
Paul, there's information too with the Australian Cyber Security Centre as well. So they provide another sort of resource that you can go to as well. They have lots of information there. And plus, they also want to pick up what patterns are with these types of attacks as well, so they can see, well, is it just hitting one industry group? Is it very similar, this sort of a thing? And then they can actually take some action to deal with it.
Because it's worthwhile calling out that the Cyber Security Centre has very strong links with the regulatory authorities as well, and the AFP and those things. So they're tracking at multiple levels within government, so that's a good thing.
Excellent. Well, we have another question that's been submitted online. So what are the risks with dealing with offshore call centres which ask for personal information to identify you? How do you navigate that one? That's a fun one, isn't it?
So I come from a past where you would never do that.
Yeah.
But then I got involved in blockchain, and I did it every day almost, setting up. So, it's again, in my particular case, I was trading in currency, so I needed to do it. Therefore, the risk-reward balanced it out, all right? But now it's sitting out there forever. This is passports and everything. So, but in my prior life, I would never do that. So it's interesting how the world changes depending on what you need to do. So,
It also depends, are you calling them or are they calling you?
Yeah.
Are you controlling the conversation so you can verify that you're actually speaking to who you think you're speaking to before you then go, well, here's my passport.
Who initiated the exchange? Yeah.
But it is a challenge.
Yeah, a healthy level of suspicion / paranoia maybe should be maintained at all times, right?
Also the minimum amount of data, right? The minimum amount of information.
Yeah.
So the rule is just give them the basic information they ask for, and if they want to extend that to ask for more information, you've got to ask why.
Okay.
Why do you need that? I've already given you this.
We've got one more question online, which another interesting one. What kind of information are hackers looking for, and what can they get from me? So this is a really open question here. So we've mentioned nation-state actors, and we've mentioned criminally organised online crime. So what other sort of threat actors are we looking at under the banner of hackers?
Well, I can. There's millions, of course, but the one that I always find interesting is what's the number one asset of your company? And thinking about that, and quite often it's your customer list.
Yeah.
And if someone got access to your customer list, just think of the damage they would do if they then gave it to your competitors. So you look at the wine industry, look at those industries. So when we talk about information, it's not just highly sensitive financial information. It's something as rudimentary as just a list of your customers is highly valuable. Should be protected, extremely tightly.
I think another one, Steve, on that is also staff as well.
Yep.
Identity theft is probably where the bucket I'd put it in. They're looking for like senior executives or key people within the organisation, trying to impersonate them. You know, what we were talking about before. Hitting the button when they shouldn't, and all those sorts of things. That's pretty relevant as well.
Yeah.
So what they do is they get something which they can then pivot to something else. So anything that allows them to take some bit of information to then go and try and gather others. And a classic is pretending to be someone, ringing up, asking them, can you please give me this, I've lost my password, whatever. And then they just tell you everything about this person. So it's again, call centres have to have, or anyone in business has to have a protocol, a process about how to release private information to anyone, really.
Excellent. All right, well, we don't have any more questions submitted online. I'll just open up to our audience on the floor here. Does anybody else have any questions they'd like to throw to our panel members? Yeah, go for it.
What would you say to small and medium business owners that don't believe that it's going to happen to them? And sometimes not because they don't want to see the information, but they are too busy running the business.
Yeah.
How do we change that perspective or that